First Story by Emily Thompson. It was a Thursday night, just like any other, in our cozy home in the suburbs of Chicago. The autumn wind was gentle, and the streets were quiet, save for the occasional passing car. My partner, Alex, and I had settled in for the evening, our usual routine of dinner and a movie, creating a comfortable, familiar atmosphere. As the credits rolled on the screen, a sharp knock at the door jolted us. It was odd for someone to visit at this hour. Peering through the peephole, I saw a hooded figure obscured by the dim porch light. Something about the situation felt off, but against my better judgment, I opened the door slightly. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice steady despite the unease settling in my stomach. No response came. The figure stood still, head tilted, as if examining the door. Then, without warning, he lunged forward, trying to push the door open. I screamed, pushing back with all my might, heart pounding in my ears. Alex rushed over, slamming the door shut, and we quickly locked it. We thought it was over, but then we heard it. The sound of footsteps, multiple, encircling our house. The porch light flickered as shadows darted across the windows. We were being surrounded. Panic set in. We rushed to our phones, but to our horror, neither had a signal. It was as if we had been cut off from the world. Whispers and muffled voices came from outside, too low to make out words, but enough to send shivers down our spines. We barricaded ourselves in the living room, eyes fixed on the windows as shadows loomed. The feeling of being watched, hunted, was inescapable. Hours passed like this. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside, heightening our fear. Finally, as the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, the presence outside seemed to dissipate. We cautiously stepped out, the neighborhood appearing as peaceful as it always had, with no sign of the previous night's terror. The police found no evidence, no footprints, nothing to suggest we hadn't imagined it all. But we knew what we experienced was real. The fear too palpable to be a figment of our imagination. We moved out shortly after, unable to shake the feeling of being watched in our own home. That story was a chilling reminder of how quickly safety can turn into terror. But brace yourself as the next tale delves even deeper into the heart of darkness. Second Story by John Miller. I'm John Miller, and what I'm about to share still haunts me. It happened in the winter of 2019 in my family home in rural Pennsylvania. I was alone, my parents away on a trip. I always enjoyed solitude, but that night, everything changed. The evening started ordinarily. I cooked dinner, watched some TV, and browsed the internet. Around midnight, I decided to head to bed. That's when I first heard it. A faint scraping sound, like nails on wood, coming from the living room. Thinking it was just the house settling, I shrugged it off. As I lie in bed, the silence of the house felt heavier, more oppressive than usual. Then, a sudden loud bang from downstairs made me sit upright. My heart raced as I listened for more sounds. Nothing. Mustering courage, I grabbed my baseball bat and tiptoed downstairs. The house was dark, the only light coming from the moon casting eerie shadows. I checked every room. Nothing seemed out of place until I reached the living room. The family portrait on the wall was askew, as if someone had knocked it. I adjusted it, trying to calm my nerves, telling myself it was all in my head. Returning to bed, I tried to sleep, but a feeling of unease gnawed at me. Then I heard it again, the scraping, now accompanied by a faint whispering. It was unintelligible, a hushed murmur that seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere. I froze, my eyes scanning the darkness of my room. The next few hours were a blur of terror. Sounds came and went. A tap on the window, a creak in the hallway, whispers that felt agonizingly close, yet distant. I was paralyzed, too scared to move, too scared to even breathe loudly. Morning light brought relief, but also confusion. The house was silent. The ominous feelings from the night before, gone. I searched every inch of the house again, but found nothing. No signs of entry, no explanation for the noises. I couldn't shake off the experience. I started questioning my sanity, wondering if it was all just a product of my imagination. But the fear, the chilling whispers, they felt all too real. It's been years and I still can't explain what happened that night. All I know is that I never stay alone in that house anymore. John's story reminds us that sometimes the scariest horrors are those that lurk in the unseen corners of our own homes. But hold on, as the next story takes us into the depths of a mother's nightmare. Third story by Sarah Johnson. My name is Sarah Johnson, and this is a story about one terrifying night I experienced in the summer of 2021. I was living in a small, old house in Salem, Oregon, with my 7-year-old son, Jacob. My husband was away on a business trip, leaving Jacob and me alone for the weekend. It started as a normal evening. Jacob and I played board games and watched a movie before I tucked him into bed. Around midnight, I was jolted awake by a strange noise. It was a scratching sound, faint but persistent, coming from the attic above. The attic had always given me an uneasy feeling, a cold, unwelcoming space that we seldom used. Gathering my courage, I decided to investigate, not wanting to let my imagination run wild. I grabbed a flashlight and quietly made my way to the attic door. As I climbed the creaky stairs, the scratching grew louder, accompanied by a soft, rhythmic thumping. My heart pounded in my chest as I pushed open the attic door. The beam from my flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but old boxes and dust-covered furniture. I moved cautiously, scanning the room. Then, my light fell upon something unsettling. A small, old-fashioned toy drum, one I had never seen before, lying in the corner. As I approached it, the thumping stopped abruptly, leaving only silence. Feeling unnerved, I quickly retreated downstairs, convincing myself it was just a rodent or the house settling. But as I lie in bed, trying to sleep, I heard it again, the scratching, now accompanied by a faint, childlike giggle. Terrified, I rushed to Jacob's room. He was sound asleep, undisturbed. The noises continued intermittently throughout the night, a chilling symphony of scratches, thumps, and unsettling laughter. I stayed awake, holding Jacob close, praying for morning. When the sun rose, I inspected the attic again. The toy drum was gone, no trace of its presence remaining. I couldn't explain what had happened, and I still can't. We moved out shortly after, but the memory of that night lingers, a haunting reminder of the unexplainable. Sarah's experience is a chilling reminder that sometimes the most innocent of spaces can harbor the darkest secrets. Up next, we delve into a story of a night that turned from mundane to menacing in an instant. Fourth story by Michael Roberts. I'm Michael Roberts, and the events I'm about to recount occurred on a frigid night in December 2020 in my home in Denver, Colorado. It was supposed to be a regular night, but it turned into a living nightmare. That evening, after a long day at work, I decided to turn in early. The house was silent, the only sound being the occasional howl of the wind outside. Sometime past midnight, a loud crash downstairs jolted me awake. My first thought was a break-in. Heart pounding, I crept out of bed and grabbed the baseball bat I kept for protection. The house was dark, the only light coming from the street lamps outside, casting long, ominous shadows. I could hear muffled voices and footsteps, confirming my worst fear. There were intruders in my home. Stealthily, I made my way downstairs, staying in the shadows. Peeking into the living room, I saw two figures rifling through my belongings. My mind raced with panic and anger. How dare they violate my home, my sanctuary? I decided to confront them, stepping into the room with the bat raised. "Get out of my house," I shouted. The intruders, caught off guard, turned towards me. One of them, a tall, burly man, pulled out a knife, his eyes cold and threatening. The situation escalated quickly. The man lunged at me, and a struggle ensued. Every second felt like an eternity as I fought to protect myself and my home. The adrenaline coursing through my veins gave me strength I never knew I had. In the chaos, the second intruder panicked and fled, leaving his accomplice behind. The fight moved to the kitchen, where I managed to disarm the man knocking the knife away. Eventually, I overpowered him, pinning him down until the police arrived, which I had managed to call during a brief moment in the struggle. The aftermath was a blur of police statements and questions. The intruder was arrested, and I was left with a house in disarray and a mind reeling from the shock. The ordeal left me with bruises and a deep sense of vulnerability. In the weeks that followed, I struggled with anxiety and fear. Every sound at night made me jump. Every shadow seemed threatening. It took time, but I eventually found my peace again, installing a security system and joining a neighborhood watch. The experience changed me, made me more cautious, more aware of the fragility of safety. Michael's harrowing encounter is a stark reminder of the dangers that can lurk in our own homes. But the next story takes us to a place supposed to be a haven away from home, yet it turns out to be anything but safe. Fifth story by Laura Smith. My name is Laura Smith, and I want to share a story from a trip I took in the summer of 2022. It was supposed to be a relaxing getaway in the picturesque countryside of Tuscany, Italy. I had booked a charming Airbnb, a rustic villa surrounded by vineyards. The photos looked like something out of a travel magazine. Little did I know, it would become the setting of my worst nightmare. I arrived on a sunny afternoon, the villa more beautiful than the pictures. The host, a friendly local woman, showed me around and then left me to settle in. The first few hours were blissful. I explored the villa, admiring the antique furniture and the stunning views of the rolling hills. As night fell, the villa, lit only by the soft glow of lamps, took on a different character. It felt older, the shadows in the corners seeming deeper, the creaks of the wooden floor louder. I brushed off the unease, attributing it to being in a new place alone. I decided to call it a night early, retreating to the cozy bedroom upstairs. That's when things started to get strange. Lying in bed, I heard soft footsteps outside my room, Thinking it might be the host, I called out, but there was no response, just the sound of footsteps fading away. Unable to sleep, I went to investigate. The villa was silent, the only sound my own footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. I found nothing amiss and returned to bed, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. But then the air turned cold, and I felt a sudden, inexplicable sense of dread. The room seemed to darken, and I saw it, a shadowy figure at the foot of my bed, barely visible in the dim light. I blinked, and it was gone. Heart racing, I turned on all the lights, but there was no one there. The rest of the night was a series of unexplained occurrences. Doors would softly close on their own. Whispers echoed through the halls, and several times I felt a chilling touch on my shoulder, only to turn around to an empty room. Morning couldn't come soon enough. As soon as the first light of dawn broke, I packed my bags and left, not even bothering to say goodbye to the host. The serene beauty of the villa was now overshadowed by the terror of the night. I later learned from locals in the nearby village that the villa was known to be haunted. It had a history of strange occurrences dating back generations. Guests often reported similar experiences, some even claiming to have seen apparitions. That trip was meant to be a peaceful retreat, but it turned into a night of fear I'll never forget. I still travel, but I'm much more careful about where I stay. Sometimes the most picturesque places hide the darkest secrets. These stories remind us that horror isn't just in movies. It can be lurking around any corner, in the most ordinary places. If you enjoyed these tales, don't forget to check out the video on the screen now. It's one of my personal favorites. Thanks for listening, and remember, the scariest stories are often the ones that could happen to any of us. Stay safe and sleep tight.